Hello, BookTube. Matthew at Mayberry Book Club and I have for months and months and months now done a little book club of two where we read something together every month. It's been a great deal of fun. Uh, it and We have read all over the map, but one of the constants in the Mayberry Book Club has been graphic novels, comic books. Matthew is a total newcomer to the world of comic books, and that means that some of the most venerated stuff in the comic book world has largely passed him by, or not done anything for him, or not much for him. We recently had a little contretemps in our Mayberry Book Club where I floated the idea of reading a miniseries, a comic book miniseries called Avengers Forever. And I told him I would love to do it, but I can't do this read along with you because you don't know anything about comic books, and this will be totally incomprehensible to you. And he had a foot stomping, hair tossing moment where he said, "No one's going to tell me what I can and cannot read," and ordered the book before I could stop him. So since he spent money on it, Irish Catholic guilt said that we had to read it. So we did, and he put a brave face on it, but I don't think he got more than a percentage point of the whole thing. Because Avengers Forever is a love letter to 50 years of Marvel continuity. It's in the weeds continuity bragging. So if you haven't been reading the Avengers forever, since their first issue, if you haven't been reading and studying them all that time, not a lot of it is going to make much sense to you. Because the author is constantly referencing, constantly looking at little details from previous issues, which you will remember if you were a longtime fan, but which he is not trying to explain to people who are not longtime fans. I felt after Avengers Forever that I owed Matthew a comic book series collected into a graphic novel that wouldn't do that, something that he would really, really like. And something came right to mind, and that was Marvels from the early 1990s by Kurt Busiek, written by Kurt Busiek with art by the great Alex Ross, who also did the artwork for Kingdom Come, a graphic novel that Matthew and I read. Marvels tells the story of Marvel superheroes from the viewpoint of ordinary people. From the viewpoint, so we are not, the camera is not taking us to Avengers Mansion or to the Justice League satellite. It's from the viewpoint of ordinary people. The story starts off in the early 1940s with a group of newsmen. We largely follow a group of newsmen, one of whom is named Phil Sheldon. There's also a young man who's pretty obviously a very young J. Jonah Jameson, who will then go on decades later to own the Daily Bugle in New York City. These news hounds are always up for any kind of an event. Some of them are yearning to get posted to Europe, where war has already broken out and where careers are being made. And Phil Sheldon is one of those. We learn that he is sweet on a neighborhood girl. He asks her to marry him, and he's hoping to be posted to Europe. He's hoping to be posted to a war zone so that he can make his name as a photographer and maybe, a photojournalist. But while all that is going on and everyone's going about their business and watching the newsreels before the movie show and whatnot, something else starts to happen. And Phil Sheldon is right there at the beginning because he is in part of a group of journalists that are invited to the lab of a scientist named Phineas Horton, who has something to show them. He has a man inside a tube. And when he introduces oxygen into the tube, the man is engulfed in flames. This is the first issue. Marvels came out as a 4-issue miniseries in the comic book stores before it was collected into a book. It's been collected into many, many books. I have a really nice hardcover with a fold-out dust jacket that is currently under a tarp. I'm lucky that I have these things. I'm lucky. I have these originals. I bought them when they first came out. And when Phineas Horton brings these journalists to his laboratory, he introduces them to the Human Torch. When he introduces air into the tube, his man catches fire. And at first, the journalists are not impressed. So what? You took a store mannequin and doused it in kerosene. So what? And then it moves. It looks at them. And look what Alex Ross does with their reactions. They are stunned because it's alive. The creature inside that tube is alive and naturally escapes from Horton's control. That is the original Human Torch. Now, if you don't know anything about comic books, if you come to these things cold, You may be confused by this because in the 1960s, Stan Lee decided to rebrand Marvel's superheroes. Marvel had been a previous company under a different name. The Human Torch did not appear. It appeared in a Marvel comic, but that was the title of the comic. It was published by somebody else. Stan Lee decided to reinvent the superhero genre. We've been over this many times, both on the Mayberry Book Club and on my my weekly comic books discussions with Michael K. Vaughan. And he introduced a new superhero team called the Fantastic Four. And one of the members of that team, young Johnny Storm, when he is bombarded by cosmic ray radiation, realizes that he can burst into flame and fly. And he calls himself the Human Torch. Now, later on, writers said that he had read Human Torch comic books and immediately thought that way. Stan Lee at the time was just thinking, that character's gone, but I might as well use the concept. I might as well reuse the concept. So there are two Human Torches. And that's going to be a little confusing. This is the first one, the original one of Marvel's original trinity of great characters. This is an android who can burst into flame and control his flame and fly and throw fireballs and whatnot. Once you're reading this issue and you see the original Human Torch appear, you know what you're going to get in this issue. Now, Phil Sheldon and his friends are right there when this is happening. Ground zero. But they're not party to any of the things that comic books usually show us. Comic books usually take us up into the air, up onto the tops of buildings, inside the heads of these characters. This Marvel's does not do that. It stays resolutely on the man on the streets viewpoint of the sudden infusion of weird creatures into the world. And when you're reading this issue and you see the original Torch be introduced, you know what's coming. If you're a Marvel fan, you know what's coming. Because just like DC Comics has a trinity of bedrock core great characters, so does Marvel. And that trinity is the original Human Torch, the android Human Torch, Prince Namor the Submariner, and Captain America. So you know that when you encounter the Human Torch, it's not going to be long before you encounter the Submariner. And sure enough, Phil Sheldon is at a diner when his sweetheart comes in and says, "I was on my lunch break. I took my sandwich to the waterfront like I usually do, but there was a man, Phil. This big, eerie-looking, naked man. He had a bandaged girl. The police said he kidnapped her from the hospital. The police, they shot him, but Phil, the bullets didn't even hurt him." And there we get the Submariner. And there is Betty Dean, the policewoman. You'll notice something, right? You eagle-eyed people will notice something right away. Alex Ross, the painter, the artist who does all of this artwork, takes a couple of liberties in the course of the 4 issues here. Not many at all. But one of the most noticeable ones is that he figures if Prince Namor the Submariner grew up at the bottom of the ocean, he wouldn't wear any clothes. So his Submariner looks the same, is bulletproof, is super strong, has wings on his ankles that allow him to fly, but he doesn't have little green swim trunks on. He's naked. And he hurls a police car at his tormentors and swims away with a contemptuous look over his shoulder. And the appearance, needless to say, since the Submariner represents the water and the Human Torch represents flame, they start to fight right away. Look at that artwork. Just amazing. That's the Brooklyn Bridge. We saw Gwen Stacy fall off that bridge and die, and we're going to see it again. Needless to say, they start fighting, and it causes havoc. We don't usually see this, but that's like a downed an elevated car with people being helped out of it. And that chaos, casually done. It's never the intention of the Submariner or the Human Torch to hurt anybody. It's just collateral damage. That causes Phil Sheldon to doubt whether or not it's any kind of a world in which he should get married. If he can't protect his wife, if he can't be the man, what can he do in a world of these larger than life beings that suddenly have suddenly appeared and have massive superpowers? It throws a wrench into his romance and underscores a great decision on Kurt Busiek's part. He understood before he wrote a single word of this that if the ordinary man on the street story is not interesting to us, we're going to start missing what we're not getting. We're going to start missing the normal superhero comics. So he makes Phil Sheldon interesting. You're invested in his story. Absolutely you are, in a way, that, for instance, you aren't all that much with Norman McKay, the human anchor and narrator of Kingdom Come. Phil Sheldon has a story to tell in this issue. The bulk of the issue is this rivalry between the Human Torch and the Submariner. But things change. Phil loses his nerve. He temporarily puts a halt to his wedding plans. But then something happens that gives him the inspiration, the feeling that maybe there is still a place in the world for ordinary Joes. And that something is the appearance of Captain America. Which again, when Phil is not seeing something, we see it in black and white. And that's what we're told. He hit like a blitzkrieg. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing about him. Nobody admitted to knowing anything at the Department of the Army, but they sure were smug about something. And the headlines, the Nazi saboteurs, the assassination rings, the fifth columnists. Every day it seemed like there was something new. He strolled out of Nazi strongholds like he was walking through the park, shrugged off bullets and bayonets. And we ate it up like candy. And we're shown that the ordinary folks on the street, including apparently Popeye, love it. They just love it. Another person we see on the streets, kid named Nick Fury. And notice how Alex Ross, I want to get to this. When Alex Ross is showing us this young 20-something Nick Fury, notice the way the light and shadows play on his face. We only see one eye. He has both eyes. It's artistic foreshadowing. And that's done without a heavy hand at all. We're going to get back to that. This causes, the appearance of Captain America causes the ordinary person in the movie theaters watching newsreels to realize that these things, these creatures, these marvels are here to stay. Here we have them fighting against Japanese operatives. And once again, we have a very strategically placed metal post there because Prince Namor still is not wearing any clothes. He apparently doesn't in the course of this entire issue. It changes everything. And it encourages Phil Sheldon to get married. He feels bucked up by that. He feels like he's a part of it now. He's not hiding from it anymore. So when word comes that the Submariner is attacking New York City, look at this double-page spread where a Submariner-induced wave hits the city. There you can see the Human Torch is trying to stop things. When word comes, Phil Sheldon is up on the roof taking photos. He refuses to hide. And as a result, again, collateral damage. In the course of the fight, a brick strikes him in the face and destroys one of his eyes. So we next meet him in the hospital, and he has only one eye. But he is more determined than ever to be a part of this, and finds his way to Europe. He gets to the theater of war just as he hoped he would. And he writes back to his now wife. I've been thinking about what I tried to tell you when I left, about that day and what happened. I think I know how to say it now. I've been waiting for the marvels to go away, and what I realized that day, that maybe we all realized, they weren't some temporary thing like the World's Fair or the Olympics or even the war. They were for real. The marvels are here to stay, and there's more of them all the time. Citizen V, the Whizzer, Blue Diamond. I could wait forever if I wanted, but that would not stop. But that would just stop me, not them. And the thing I didn't see until I was up on that building and the wave was crashing around me, it isn't going to be them that adapts to us. The world is different now. The rules are changed forever, and nobody has any idea what the future is going to bring. But do you know what? It's going to be one heck of a ride finding out. And we get a great build-up here where they're running. He and a colleague of his are running through the woods. They are overlooking a Nazi stronghold. And when one of his colleague points, we get the closing 2-page spread. That Nazi stronghold is now under attack from these marvels. It's not just the Human Torch. It's his teenage sidekick Toro, who has the same powers. It's Captain America and his teenage sidekick Bucky, here using a gun. It's Prince Namor, flying under his own power, and once again, there's a strategic placing of the shield, and there's all these other figures, and you notice something here that I want to point out throughout this issue, which is that you don't need, in the context of this issue, you don't need to know who those people are. You've been introduced to 3 of them. You now know what Phil Sheldon is talking about. You don't need to know who any of these other people are. As far as you know, they're never going to crop up again. Same thing is true with all of the little, what the kids call Easter eggs, that are sprinkled all throughout this issue. Phil Sheldon is walking around on the street, and we see that. Many people, when this first issue came out, were convinced that was Superman. Of course, it's not Superman. Superman's a different company. He doesn't exist in this world. But the fact that that is the Angel, the original Angel, is not something you need to know. You're never going to be quizzed on it. That's the neat thing about this issue. Here, let me get you another famous little Easter egg here that fans just loved. The boy who's selling newspapers, talking about the escape of the Human Torch. That is what the boy looks like. Never mind the dialogue bubble. Only boomers think that newspaper boys on the streets in the 1940s said "Wuxtree, Wuxtree." Only boomers think that. They didn't. But the boy is Billy Batson, who sold newspapers in his spare time when he wasn't being the original Captain Marvel. But that's the point that I want to make about this, that makes it so successful, that makes it completely different from Avengers Forever, is that all of the in-jokes here, all of the stuff that's here as a loving nod to continuity, and believe me, they're everywhere. They're on every page of this issue, of every issue of Marvel's. All of that stuff is not necessary. You don't bark your shin on it. By the time you get to that magnificent, it's just an excuse to show it to you again. By the time you get to that magnificent double-page spread at the end, you are situated in the world of Marvels. You don't need to know who those other people are. I do. I know every single thing there is to know about all of those other characters. But you don't need to. You've got the basics. You don't feel left out. That instead, you feel the thrill that Phil Sheldon is talking about as they enter literally a new world. The Marvels aren't going anywhere. They're here to stay. Even the war is only temporary, but they're not. And that is the first issue of Marvel Comics Marvel's miniseries. We're going to go on from here next week, but we're not changing narrators. Phil Sheldon is living through this story. That was the original stroke of genius on Kurt Busiek's part, is that he realized that according to Marvel's own continuity, one lifetime would have been enough to go from the 1940s to about the early 1980s, when the story stops, when Marvel went intellectually, spiritually, creatively, and also financially bankrupt, and also when, coincidence? Michael K. Vaughan became a fan. I'm not drawing any lines, mind you, but the story doesn't go right up to the present day, but that was a genius inspiration on Kurt Busiek's part, that I can follow. I can tell the story through one person. That's fantastic. Nothing like that can really be done with, for instance, DC Comics. You can kind of, sort of come close, maybe, but with Marvel, absolutely. So that we're going to move on to the next to book number 2, which I have here in the room. That's great because I don't have it anywhere else. I don't have access to my graphic novel or my hardcover, but I have these in the room. So we'll move on to the next one next week. I hope you're reading along with us. This is a winner. This is a keeper for you. I don't have sometimes I have doubts about what Matthew's reactions will be. I intend to put him through his paces in August, but for this, I don't have any doubt at all. He's going to love the whole thing. And you will too if you give it a try, whether you like comics or not. Keep in mind, he's completely new. Aside from the graphic novels we've read together, he's completely inexperienced in reading this stuff. So that is your Mayberry Book Club for today, and I'm going to wrap this up. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.